Batman and Robin, Year One, Issue 6. Mark Waid writing with Chris Samnee on the art. It's wild that Mark Waid has two books. Well, technically three this week with the other book, but with the Lex Luthor book. But these two books keep coming out in the same week, and it's like the worst thing Mark Waid's writing with the best thing Mark Waid's writing.
Sorry. Talk about Whiplash.
Samnee is a perfect creative partner for Waid. I think helps.
I mean, yeah, that's true, but I do think the writing is better as well, though. I don't think it's just the fantastic art that's helping it. I think this has been a really interesting exploration of this early Batman and Robin relationship. Last issue ended with Dick being kidnapped by Gimraldi, and Batman sort of racing out to try and find him, and realizing quickly, like, there's a note left for him on the bike saying, we're waiting, Gimraldi. So, like, they tell him in uncertain terms. They use Robin as bait for Batman, but of course Dick doesn't tell them anything, and that's kind of fun. All that art in there, which they've done a bunch of times with this villain, but the blinds and the light coming through and the lines on his face and all that. Just a lot of good stuff that feels very sort of noir. But you got just a lot of action here with Batman sneaking into the building, causing distractions, seeing that they've got like a weird lab where they're experimenting on people, and this guy turns into like a monster. And it's like, okay, are we doing like Monster Men stuff here? Is this kind of like going to like use some of that? I don't know.
It felt like that book that we read from Jurgens. That was like the original Batman set in like the 30s.
Oh yeah,
they were making the
First
monsters.
First night.
Yeah. So I was feeling like that for a second. I'm like, is this Grundy? Oh no, it's not Grundy. This is something else.
Yeah, for a second I thought it was like Clayface was getting like some treatment or something, but no, it's just like this guy's turned into like a big mutated kind of monster.
Definitely feels like Proto Venom, maybe. Like maybe Grimaldi's trying to get the market on that stuff.
Maybe.
Right?
So Robin actually gets out of his ropes easily, and is quite cocky about it when he does, as Batman's dealing with the big monster.
Yeah, the way that he says, if you call those knots, right? As he says he's wiggling out. Again, the voice is perfect for this era of Dick.
Yeah, for sure. And he ends up like, okay, he can't go down. At this point, the lab started to like, be set on fire and whatnot. So he goes up to the roof. He gets a rope and something he can use as a grapple. It's basically just a faucet that he's using as a hook. But he basically makes a tightrope across to another building. And Batman's trying to find him, worried about him, and like, Batman's narration is very concerned. Like, he is like on a warpath. He's like, if anything's happened to him, this is my fault. I've been lucky that he's not gotten hurt so far. And then he gets to where he's been held captive, and ultimately looks out the window and sees Robin just on a tightrope, and he's like, "Oh hey, what took you so long?" Like,
and there's a smirk from Batman.
Yeah, he obviously, he's happy that Robin was able to get himself out of this. The worrying was effectively for nothing. And I really like the art in these couple of pages. Like that wide panel shot of like Dick's just little silhouette standing on top of the building looking across to the other one is just a really good sense of perspective, I thought.
Well, I thought he was going to John McClane it. I thought he was going to tie it to random, yippee-ki-yay, outside of the building.
No, he does circus shit.
Makes more sense.
Yeah, he does circus shit.
That makes much more sense.
Yeah, because the scene that comes after where Batman like confronts him about all this, and Dick's like, "All right, how much trouble am I in?" And he's like, "You cost us," and like the bike, you're rich. And he's like, "No, you cost us. There's a lab in there that I can't now sweep for evidence because it's now been burned. Right? The villains have skedaddled. I knew where they were. Now I don't. Like, here's all the ways that you've kind of like set back this case that we're working on." But ultimately, it becomes this thing where he because Dick says, I trained hard for the circus. I'm not undisciplined. I had to work really hard to be as good as I am at that. Batman says, but that's a show. We're not putting on a show, right? You make a mistake and you die. And that's when Dick says, do you know how much determination and how seriously I have to take this to do this kind of thing? And then he sort of like finally snaps and starts talking about how, because Zuko did this to my parents, I want to make sure that he can't do it to anyone else, and kind of like opens up. And ultimately this becomes less about Bruce giving him into trouble and Bruce being happy that Dick's finally kind of spoken about how he feels about everything, and is finally able to kind of like relate and say, that's exactly how I felt about my parents and so on. And this is the middle of the book, because this is a 12-issue book, and it felt like this was a nice midpoint kind of like bit of growth for this relationship, where maybe like now going forward there'll be a bit more trust between them and kind of forming what we think of as like in their prime Batman and Robin. So yeah, no, I really like the writing in this scene and like the confrontation between them, and Dick pointing out that just because technically all my training was for something that was a show, being the show itself you have to take seriously to make it work. And it, I had to train for 10 hours a day. I got hurt repeatedly trying to do the rope and whatever, or what, so I think it was in the same way that some earlier issues had Batman make mistakes or underestimate Robin. I really liked in this conversation, well, Batman's not wrong about anything he says, Robin has counterpoints that are equally, oh no, he's got a point, and Batman can't really argue with that. And I think that works.
I like how Samnee does the breakdowns and stuff too, because it starts with like Dick up higher than Bruce, right? And like in filmmaking and stuff, you're showing the emphasis on here where Dick really does have the higher ground here, right? He's proven a point to Bruce, and Bruce knows it. And so I just like the way that Samnee does that, and then with the way that there's so many panels, it makes it feel very snappy as you're reading it. Because there's a lot of these smaller, more slimmer panels, some that are just of their faces and reactions to things. And yeah, so it makes for a very cinematic conversation.
Yeah. Something as simple as the moment he says, this isn't a show, the next panel of Robin's just this sort of very widescreen movie style frame of just Robin against the yellow background with his reaction. It was the idea of like the I don't know, like
indignation,
the mental alarm going off, and like the background changing to a solid color. Just it really, really works. And then Grimaldi's pissed off that he's hanging out somewhere else. So last issue they kept teasing like this file that they stole from the police that Gordon wouldn't even tell Batman about. And we find out why Gordon wouldn't tell Batman about it, because Two-Face has it and offers it to Grimaldi, and it turns out that it's the police's file of like potential Batman suspects, of like they're trying to figure out who he is, and we see just a bunch of different faces, and then of course the final panel is just that Bruce Wayne's face is in there, like that he is one of the dozens of suspects of like maybe he's Batman.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, are we going to do like they've got to throw Grimaldi off the scent now, or are they going to like, is Grimaldi just going to go around and like start, kidnapping all of these people and going after them until he figures it out, like
one by one?
Yeah, maybe have them all followed or something, or I don't know. I don't know where they go with this, but it was a fun ending because, like I said, this is the midpoint of the story, and I don't know if they're specifically writing this with the idea that it's going to be split into two trades, and maybe that was like part of the thought process. But I think this works as a nice sort of mid-season cliffhanger, if you will, of like, okay, we've kind of evolved the Batman-Robin relationship to a natural like new step where they've started to understand each other better. But we're going to throw in this extra wrench into the villain where there's maybe more of a threat there because now they have this file. But it also means that there's maybe a little bit of a confrontation due for Gordon and Batman for why they were doing this. And of course the reason why is because, well, they should be doing it because he's a vigilante.
Yeah, I think they're also taking a month off as well before the next issue.
Oh, so it really is a mid-season break.
It really is a mid-season break. Yeah, I just checked. The next issue comes out, well,
May.
No more delays. Comes out like late May.
Okay, that's fine. This is a good place to have a little break then. This works as a point.
I think it was very intentionally structured to be like this.
Yeah, and given that Samnee's doing on the art and all the issues, like that keeps him on schedule, and that's go for it. No, I mean this has been a very consistent book, and it feels like it keeps paying off on itself, and we didn't even get any like say Clayface this issue, and I'm excited to see him again because every time he's popped up, it's been an exciting jolt of life into the book, and like it's why like we keep having reasons to go back and do an early days Batman story, and arguably even for a lot of other superheroes, is because there's just something really exciting about, okay, some of the first appearances of these like villains aren't like that great because they're from the Golden Age or the early Silver Age or whatever, it's really nice to get like a full fleshed out modern telling of like the first encounter of Batman and, in this case, Clayface, but it could be, you know, anyone that's not had that treatment. Obviously, we've done it a bunch of times with Joker at this point, but, you know, I don't know if we've had it with Clayface, and there's other villains I'm sure would benefit from the same kind of attention. So it's always exciting to see. But yeah, art's great. Samnee's killing it. Like you say, layouts are great, facial expressions are great. The sequencing and the action, and particularly even just like the more quiet stuff of Dick getting up by himself to the roof to make the tightrope, all just really great flow to the point where you really enjoy just watching it play out effectively. So, no, good stuff. All right, Matt, what are you rating Batman and Robin Year One?
I'm gonna listen 8.5.
Yeah, Connor.
I'm gonna give it an 8.
I'll go 8.5 as well. Really, really good.